Your body mirrors your karma. What if the pain in your body is not a problem to fix, but a message from your soul? Could your illness be the voice of karma, whispering the truths your mind has forgotten? Is it possible that every ache, every breath, and every symptom is a spiritual teacher in disguise? Your body mirrors your karma. How physical symptoms reveal the secrets of your spiritual destiny in this space of mindful awareness. The boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. A Zen master once whispered to his disciple, "Your karma is not hidden in the stars, nor sealed in a scroll. It is written in your breath, your bones, your posture. Your body is the ink. Karma is the script. The mind believes it controls the course of destiny. It repeats thoughts like a mantra, seeks refuge in intellect, and hides within layers of ego. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. But the body, unlike the mind, cannot lie. It becomes the quiet altar where spiritual truths are inscribed without words. In the philosophy of Zen and the deep river of Buddhist teachings, karma is not merely the memory of actions. It is vibration, energy, and intention that echoes in the spaces within. When this vibration is unresolved, it surfaces in the body. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Sometimes as discomfort, sometimes as chronic pain, sometimes as mysterious illness, these are not curses or punishments. They are invitations to awaken. The body is the compass of the soul. What it suffers, it reveals. What it aches for, it reflects. And what it releases, it transforms. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. This is the story of how karma, unresolved and invisible, began to bloom in the body of a seeker until he could no longer ignore it. What followed was not just healing, but liberation, the ache that wouldn't go away. He awoke with pain in his lower back. It was not sharp enough to be considered urgent, yet not dull enough to be ignored. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. It pulsed with the weight of something ancient, as if it had been waiting for the right moment to rise. He adjusted his posture, practiced breathing techniques, applied herbs, and even fasted, yet the pain returned, stubborn and uninvited. In silence, he asked, "What is this trying to tell me?" The body responded, not in words, but in sensation. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. When he meditated, the ache became stronger. When he tried to escape, it dulled. But when he sat completely still and surrendered, it began to weep, not with tears, but with a strange sense of release. A Zen saying surfaced in his memory: "To pay attention to the body is to listen to the past." Karma wears a body. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. In the teachings of the Buddha, karma is not simply cause and effect. It is momentum of intention. Every thought, word and action plants a seed. And when those seeds are not watered with awareness, They manifest as suffering in unpredictable ways. The lower back, as described in ancient scrolls, is the spiritual shelf where burdens are carried. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Hidden guilt, unspoken resentment, and the weight of responsibilities unjustly accepted. These live not just in memory, but in muscle. The seeker began to reflect. Who had he carried? What guilt still whispered in his bones? What truths had he silenced? Each answer surfaced like a wave of sensation. The body spoke what the mind forgot. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. The hands that held anger. One morning, as he washed his hands in the stream, a strange stiffness crept into his fingers. He could stretch them, but they resisted. The coldness was not due to weather. It was the chill of suppressed emotion. In Buddhist thought, the hands are extensions of action, of doing. When they ache, it is often because they grasp too tightly. Whether to control, to punish, or to possess. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. He remembered how often he clenched his fists when someone spoke truth. He remembered how his palms sweated during moments of jealousy. His hands bore not the weight of work, but the memory of reactions. A Zen scroll teaches, "Let go or be dragged." He began to sit in meditation, imagining light pouring into his hands. With each exhale, he released a name, an event, a wound. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. And as his hands softened, so did his heart, the throat that refused to speak. Weeks later, a tightness grew in his throat. No illness, no external cause, just silence that strangled. He hadn't spoken in days. Yet inside him lived 100 untold truths. The throat in spiritual anatomy is the center of expression. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. When clogged, it is not only because of unsaid words, but also because of unspoken forgiveness. Karma clings to every silence that was meant to be a truth. He sat by the fire, whispered into the wind, "I forgive you," and again, "Forgive me," and the wind moved. He coughed, not because he was sick, but because something was leaving, not from the lungs, but from the soul. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. The eyes that forgot to see. His vision began to blur. Not the world, but his focus. He could no longer see clearly what mattered. His days became noise. His mind became fog. In Buddhist insight, the eyes represent clarity and truth. When one is not willing to face reality or when illusions are clung to, vision becomes distorted, sometimes literally. He realized he had been looking outside for answers that were born within. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. He had searched the horizon while ignoring the mirror. He turned inward, sat longer, breathed deeper, and slowly his eyes cleared. Not through glasses or potions, but through truth. He saw not just with the retina but with awareness. The feet that refused to walk forward. One day while climbing a slope, his feet gave up. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. They burned with a pain that came not from injury but hesitation. The feet in Zen understanding represent movement in life. When karma clings to the past, the future feels heavy. He sat and remembered all the moments he hesitated, all the times he avoided a decision, fearing its consequence. Each moment of indecision added weight to his steps. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. The body was not punishing him. It was revealing that the past was still his master. He bowed not to the pain but to the message. Then he stood and walked forward. Not fast, but with surrender. Healing through awareness. The pain began to recede. Not through medicine, not through force, but through understanding. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Each symptom was not an enemy, but a whisper from karma. The body mirrored what the soul needed to release. Buddha taught, just as a snake sheds its skin, we must shed our past again and again. And shedding is not done with willpower. It is done with presence. The seeker learned to ask with each discomfort, "What am I still holding?" Then he would breathe, sit and listen. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. And in that listening, karma dissolved, not erased, but understood, forgiven, and transmuted. The body is the Dharma book. In Zen, everything is a teacher. Even pain, especially pain. The body is not a cage but a parchment. It records the story of the soul. Every illness, every ache is a passage from that sacred scroll. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Karma is not abstract. It is not delayed until some future life. It arrives now in posture, in breath, in sensation. To heal the body is to understand the story it tells. To listen to the pain is to read the karma it reflects. And to release it is not to escape karma, but to fulfill its teaching. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. As a master once whispered, liberation is not the absence of suffering, but the awakening through it. The hidden messages in flesh and bone. When a leaf trembles in the wind, it is not the leaf that is moving by itself. It is moved by the unseen air. So too are the movements of the body stirred by what is invisible emotion, intention, memory, and karma. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. The physical form becomes the ground on which the seeds of all lifetimes bloom. Whether in the form of peace or pain, one who studies Zen does not look at the body as a burden but as a mirror. One that never lies. One that cannot be fooled. One that reveals what the mind seeks to suppress. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Let us now reflect on some deeper understandings. What various physical symptoms truly mean when seen through the lens of karma and spiritual destiny. 1. Chronic pain. The echo of unlearned lessons. Pain that persists without medical clarity is often a messenger of karmic entanglements yet to be resolved. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. In Buddhism, samskaras, mental and emotional imprints continue to vibrate within us, especially when not addressed with awareness. When one repeatedly experiences pain in the same area, it is not just biology. It is a sign of internal resistance. A grudge held too tightly, a grief not yet honored, or a guilt not yet forgiven. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. These manifest as stubborn discomforts. Zen does not advise running from this pain, but instead bowing to it, asking, "What are you here to teach me?" And then listening, not with the ears, but with the soul. 2 Skin conditions. Rejection of the self. The skin, the largest organ, is the boundary between the self and the world. When it itches, peels, or breaks out, the spiritual language is often this rejection of the self. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. One who carries shame, especially spiritual or emotional shame, often shows it through the skin. It is as if the body is trying to shed what the soul refuses to accept. In Zen, healing such symptoms does not begin with cream or cure, but with compassion for oneself. The deeper the acceptance, the clearer the skin becomes because the war within is ending. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. 3. Stomach disorders. Digestion of life itself. When digestion falters, it often reflects a deeper inability to process experience. Regret, fear of the future, or bitterness about the past congest the spiritual energy of the abdomen. In Buddhism, the belly is the seat of will and vitality. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. To constantly suffer indigestion is to reveal that life itself is being resisted. The cure is not only in what is eaten, but how one lives. Slowing down, practicing gratitude, letting go of control. These begin to restore the fire of digestion and allow karma to be processed with grace. 4. Breathing difficulties, suppressed grief, and unlived truths. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. The breath is the bridge between body and spirit. When it becomes shallow, restricted or labored, it is often because emotions have been trapped in the chest. Uncried tears become breathlessness. Words that needed to be spoken but never were live as tension in the lungs. In meditation, one must return to the breath not as a function but as a prayer. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Every inhale must be a welcoming. Every exhale must be a surrender. Buddhism teaches, breathe in awareness, breathe out release. When done with devotion, breath clears karma more powerfully than 1,000 rituals. 5. weight imbalance, protection, and fear. Whether excess weight is gained or extreme thinness is present, the body is often trying to either protect or punish. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Obesity can be the armor worn to defend from emotional invasion. Emaciation can be the result of inner rejection. Karma is subtle. It may make one unconsciously carry more than their soul signed up for. To return to balance is not to shame the body, but to befriend it, to ask it, "What are you holding for me?" When that question is answered in stillness, weight begins to dissolve. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Not because of diets, but because the soul no longer needs to carry what is not its own. 6. Headaches and pressure in the skull. Overthinking and disconnection from present. When the head hurts frequently, it is not always because of tension in the nerves, but often because of tension in time. The mind that spins endlessly in worry, comparison, and judgment creates friction in the subtle body. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. In Zen, this is known as the spinning wheel, where thought chases thought with no breath in between. The cure is stillness. One must drop into the moment like rain into a pond, letting go of mental karma, old beliefs, ancestral fears. Societal programming invites a lightness in the skull that no medicine can deliver. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. 7. Fatigue, spiritual resistance, tiredness. When persistent speaks of more than poor sleep or poor diet, it is a sign of spiritual resistance. The soul is dragging often because it is walking a path not aligned with its truth. When fatigue becomes a pattern, one must not simply rest but realign. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Am I living with purpose? Am I doing what I came to do in this life? When one lives in harmony with their dharma, their spiritual duty, energy becomes natural, spontaneous, and effortless. Fatigue is often the first alarm bell from karma when the path is misaligned. The karma of ignorance. What happens when one refuses to listen? Those who ignore their body's wisdom delay their evolution. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Karma then must shout louder. The whisper becomes a cry. The tension becomes illness. The ache becomes collapse. Zen teaches that avoidance is a form of spiritual laziness. When one refuses to listen to the body, they are refusing to learn. But even this is met with compassion. The Dharma is patient. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Karma is never in a rush, but it never forgets. One may deny, escape, distract, but eventually all must come back to the temple of their own body to kneel and receive its teaching. True healing, releasing the karmic blueprint. Healing is not the same as curing. Healing means coming into wholeness with your spiritual truth. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Sometimes symptoms will remain but suffering will not. Other times, when the lesson is complete, the body returns to vibrant balance. To release karma from the body, one must follow this sacred path. 1. Listen to pain without judgment. Pain is not betrayal. It is guidance. 2. Honor the story behind the symptom. Everything physical has a spiritual root. Seek it. Free. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Let go of blame, especially of yourself. Karma is not punishment. It is opportunity. 4. Forgive the past. Until you forgive, the body must keep reminding you. 5. Practice daily awareness. The more conscious you become, the less karma must teach through suffering. The sacred dialogue between body and soul. The body is the bell of awakening. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Every signal it gives, whether joy or pain, is the sound of karma playing its melody. Those who listen live wisely. Those who obey its deeper message live freely. Zen whispers gently, when you can see the illness as the master, not the enemy, you have entered the temple of truth. The spiritual destiny of each soul is hidden not in a distant future, not in the stars, not in sacred books, but in the pulse of the body. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. To honor that pulse is to walk the path of liberation. To listen to your body is to bow to your karma. And when karma is understood, not resisted, it begins to heal not just the body but the soul. Thanks for watching. Hope enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more content like this. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root. Just click the subscribe button below and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Also, feel free to leave a comment and let me know what you'd like to see next. See you in the next video. In this space of mindful awareness, the boundary between body and spirit dissolves, and healing begins where understanding takes root.